Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. We're doing Venom, Let There Be
Yeah.
Carnage.
Can I just say, this is the first movie that I got to personally watch on opening night since the pandemic started, and that was a level of surreal that was just a lot of fun. Good energy, even though there wasn't a lot of people in the room. It was just it felt good. It felt good to be in theaters again.
I'm glad you had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Well, I mean, they still don't really have any reverence for Venom in this movie.
Yeah.
But honestly, from what I remember liking about the first one, they kept that going. So I don't really have that big of an issue with the movie. I was kind of just like, it's short. It seems like they've cut corners, but at least Venom and Eddie had fun times together.
See, the funny thing is, the one thing I noticed when leaving the theater was, oh my God, it's before midnight, because I watched the 10 o'clock show. I'm like, whoa, I did not pay attention to the runtime. It was a short movie, and I appreciated that. Like, for what this movie was, I was like, it moved and moved fast, and it didn't linger. It felt good to me, like that runtime. I liked it.
Yeah, I don't like the runtime, but I think for how silly it is, I get how people are kind of just like, oh, whatever, it doesn't stay up. But I think obviously for this movie to work properly, you probably should have added some more time to flesh out ideas.
Yeah.
I think
there was definitely a lot left on the table for sure.
Yeah, I think that everything I like about it was down to like, oh yeah, like I like the relationship between Venom and Eddie. And then I was kind of like, oh, the beginning, I guess the beginning kind of makes it seem like, oh, this is just going to be a Cletus Cassidy movie. Like it's him as a kid. It's Shriek. I think her name's Frances.
Yeah.
Like it's their love story kind of at the beginning. And they get separated and she becomes like, well, we find out why she has the scars on her face because she got shot and everything. So you're like, oh, okay, like I see where we're going. It's like it's Let There Be Carnage. So we've already established Venom and Eddie. We're gonna really focus on them. But then it switches back to like, no, we're doing Venom and Eddie stuff, which is why I think the runtime doesn't really work, because it made sense if you were just doing the Carnage stuff. Obviously, Venom can show up to try and save the day, but when they switch away from it to do the whole, oh, Venom and Eddie are breaking up, I didn't think that really worked for the runtime.
Yeah, I thought that's where, if at all, the movie dragged, and that's just because it's like, okay, we as an audience understand that this is temporary, half an act, maybe, I don't know, whatever. But it's just like, we know at that point the breakup, like motif that they're playing up, they have to get back together toward the end of it. They have to. So that's the only part that does suck, is just like, we know it has to happen, and it's delayed until it does, and that part does suck.
I disagree. I don't think it's delayed. I think they just are like cutting corners, and so I'm just like, oh, okay. Like I feel like if the movie was about how Venom and Eddie actually learned to coexist, then if you just wanted to do 90 minutes, which I don't think they did, then spend the 90 minutes about that. You don't really have room to do the other stuff, but
which is fair,
because nothing feels like it's dragging. Everything feels like, well, we're just going for it, like it's just happening, like like just scene for scene, like it was happening. I didn't feel like anything felt delayed or dragged. Maybe Venom being like out and using up bodies, but even then that didn't feel delayed. It just kind of felt like, oh, I remember that. Yeah, like he has to be with Eddie because no other body can handle him. But even like having that thing where Mrs. Chen like feels bad for Venom, I'm like, what? Like, I know they're like friendly, but she's acting like, oh my god, my son's dying when Venom comes in, and then it just cuts to like he's in her body. Like, nothing felt like it was developed.
Mm.
So that's why I don't feel like anything felt like it dragged, because it's just like, oh, we just missed the part where Venom and Mrs. Chen bonded, or like even what kind of fun that could have been to see moments like that, or
Mm.
when Venom is showing Eddie the stuff in Cletus's cell, and then they go home, and you're like, oh, Venom has like a photographic memory. Like, that could be really interesting if we just watched how he helped Eddie piece back together his career. But it's like, no, we're just gonna move on from that idea too. That's never gonna come back again. So yeah, like, while I had fun, I just felt like it feels like a clip show.
It does feel like a clip show, but I feel like that's only because it's rushing to get to the post-credit scene. I mean, like, the way the movie...
I don't know about that. I think the movie is the movie, and then they've got an interesting post-credit scene. I don't even know if that was like that could have been shot like 3 weeks ago. I mean, what I'm saying is, I don't think that's part of the story. I don't think they were like, yeah, like, let's just, fill 90 minutes till we get to the post-credit.
No, I don't think that was the intention. I think the intention there was, let's wrap up the Venom verse and then move into the other universe. You know what I mean? That's what I meant by, like, it felt like it had to wrap it up and all that kind of stuff. I do agree. Like, now that you're saying that, yeah, you're right. It did feel like rushed to me. That my comment about, like, that felt like it was dragging. It was like, okay, come on, we know we have to get back here, and I just want to get to the point where I'm like, okay, if you're not going to commit to these writing points, then we're committing to a visual slugfest at the end. And I just wanted to get there because the visuals of it, just like the first one, it still worked out really, really well. Like, there's not anything bad I could say about that. That worked really, really well. And like, having Andy Serkis behind the camera, having someone that really understands that digital mocap, or like what effects can do, because his whole career is based on that for his beginning part. It really, really shined through. So I really like that. It didn't feel like a CGI fest. It felt actual fight. It was great. I loved it there. But
that's interesting. You said I didn't feel that way at all.
Really?
I was like, yeah, it's just a Venom movie. It felt on par with the last movie, which people complained about, like, in terms of it just was goop kind of going on and off the humans that we were connected to.
Yeah, but I kind of like that though. Yeah, but I like that.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it didn't feel like it was enhanced by having Andy Serkis, who's known for his mocap. Like, nothing about the movie felt like enhanced by that aspect of Andy Serkis. I'm not even saying it's bad. I'm just saying I didn't feel like, they've paid better attention to mocap now.
I genuinely, maybe this is me leaning into the story a little bit too much and giving the movie more than what it's worth, apparently, but I read into that and being like, whoa, this final fight scene to me was, because this is Serkis's first directorial debut, right?
No,
it's not. It's not. Oh, right. You said he did the Mowgli.
He's done like 5 movies at this point. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But like, I don't know. I really thought that his mocap stuff, it led into me, but maybe you're right. I have to compare it to the first one, because I was watching this. I was just not interested in watching the first one to get into this one. I really wasn't. Right.
Yeah. I didn't watch the first one. I don't think. Yeah, I think I've just seen it so that we could review it for.
Yeah.
The Venom episode. I don't not like that movie. I'm just like, yeah, it's fun.
Because that movie felt like it was too cluttered, and this is why I like this movie, because it felt a lot leaner. There was so many more side characters in the first one. This one had a lot less, which is great, because each one, when they did get screen time, actually got to do something cool, and that was kind of fun. Except for Michelle
I think
Williams,
you should rewatch the first one.
Kind of
I think they're pretty similar in terms of amount of characters.
Really? I thought it was
like,
I thought this was
who are you thinking of that was
Jenny
like cluttered?
Slate?
But like, now you've added 2 characters. That's just one extra character.
That's fair.
Everyone else comes back.
That's true.
They've only added characters.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah. I think this movie is on par with the first one. It's better. I see people like it's definitely better, but I think we're just used to what they're doing with Venom now. And I'm not saying that to say this was bad. Well, I mean, it's not a very well put together movie, but like I think it's fun, and everyone going into it already remembers what the first Venom was. So it is a logical continuation of that. So if you liked the first Venom movie, you probably will have more fun with this. But I feel like that's also the idea of like, okay, I know what wavelength this movie is on. You're gonna meet it there or you're not.
Yeah, I don't think this movie is really digging into a deeper meaning or anything like that. It's not trying to tell another story. It was just very much like, no, this is the comic book story. This is our version of it with what we're limited to do within this universe, and this is how we're gonna do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm down for that. You're right though. It doesn't do anything wildly different than the first one, and it really it's on the same. I love that word you use, the wavelength. It's on the entirely same wavelength. So I'm like, it's the exact same movie, continuation, energy, whatever you want to call it. But like, yeah, it
even comes really down to the same reason Venom wins, which was disappointing to me, which is, the symbiote and the host aren't the right fit. And
and him pointing it out is like, they're not a perfect fit. I'm like, yeah, that part.
But that's like how he won in the first movie too.
Exactly. That part.
And I'm like, I didn't. Well, that kind of sucks. If we were putting all of our chips on like Let There Be Carnage, and like we're really digging into the Carnage stuff. I don't remember. Like I only know I didn't read a lot of Carnage comics. Like I remember him from the TV show, and I remember reading like one comic with Carnage, but I always got the sense like it was the perfect marriage, like that Cletus and the symbiote worked well together.
Yes. It was supposed to be better than like every iteration I've seen. And granted, I will say this right now to our audience, I'm not a huge deep dive into the symbiote world, because the symbiote world in itself is ridiculously big. Like there's this Agent Venom character that's apparently really, really cool. Y'all take a look into that. I've just watched a couple of videos and all that kind of stuff on it. But like every iteration of Carnage I've seen has always stated that match with Cletus and Carnage's symbiote is way better than the Venom Eddie Brock match. That's how I've always seen it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the only reason you would play up Carnage. Otherwise, he is just, I don't even remember what the villain's name was in the first movie. Like whatever the symbiote was called. But like
Toxin.
Toxin. Like it's just like, well, then it's just Toxin. And I don't really, as you said, it just seems like the same movie.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously people will hear what my ranking or my rating is at the end, but like I had fun with the movie. There's no doubt about that. It is a fun time, but while watching it, I was still like very aware of how like sloppy it's not that well put together. It's not tight. And I know you weren't saying that at the beginning, but like just because it's only 90 minutes doesn't mean that they used the 90 minutes effectively.
No, well, fair. I mean, in that space, what would you have cleaned up? What would you? Because I now that you're
that's what I'm saying. Why would you limit your movie to 90 minutes in a world where people were like, Endgame 3 hours, awesome? Like, I'm not saying we need 3 hours of Carnage, but also we don't need to keep it under 2 hours.
Right. But it's difficult because I find this is the situation now. Ever since after Endgame and after Infinity War, after this is what our expectations are in terms of like Marvel movies or comic book movies, is like that fiasco. Like we built up to that for 10 years, right? For us to have this reset ability to be like, okay, I understand that the Venom universe is nowhere near that yet. And so the shorter runtimes to me is just like, this is actually, like I said, refreshing that it's not trying to do too much. But
it is trying to do too much. That's the problem.
What I meant by that is that it's not trying to do too much it's not trying to be anything other than a comic book movie right now. And within that, it does try to do a lot more than what it's capable of doing. But it's not trying to be like, oh, this is a movie about this social issue as well and all that kind of. It doesn't have that capacity, right? So I appreciated the shorter runtime.
I don't understand how the two are connected. The runtime versus what it's trying to accomplish. Like
Well, I would imagine that
like
if they're trying to fit in more, that they need more time to explore those issues, right?
okay. Well, I guess that where we differ is I think they tried to do too much and then it was only 90 minutes.
Yep.
And I think you're equating having a greater social message with doing more.
No,
I think
was
like
the social
whatever
message was
you're
just an example of like trying to do
right,
more,
but they are trying
yeah.
to do too much even without the social thing. And
Yeah.
I know that you said in the last 10 years we did, but the first like acceptable comic book movie is Superman from 1978, and that was over 2 hours. It was 2 hours and 23 minutes.
Fair.
So it's not unheard of to do that. And I think, yes, if you're talking about prestige, obviously Superman would have more prestige than Venom, but we aren't in that world anymore. We're not in the world of, oh, well, yeah, that's just a comic book movie. And you gotta like, it's that is the main reason people are going to the movies now.
Right. But I'm not,
are these comic book movies. So
I'm not trying to knock it down to the peg of like, oh, it's a comic book movie, therefore it deserves 90 minutes. I've never been that person. What I'm just saying is like, it's nice to know that we can have a comic book movie now that still is aware of the fact that it hasn't done the end game level of building and all that kind of stuff, where it's like it's making us sit down there for like 2.5 hours and like really like tie up loose ends from like 10 years worth of storytelling, right? So I just really appreciate that there's this recognition and the spectrum for a shorter runtime of a comic book movie right now. Even though you're right, it would probably benefited from an extra 15 to explore a couple more things for sure. But at the same time, I had fun. I knew what Venom 1 was, and I didn't expect anything more than what Venom 1 gave me. And that was what I guess is leading me into enjoying this movie a lot more. It was just because I'm like, I knew the limitations of this movie in the sense where I know it's trying to do Maximum Carnage. It's inspired by Maximum Carnage, but it doesn't have the same ability to reach into all the other characters, especially Spider-Man and all these, that epic that is Maximum Carnage, right? So for what they were capable of doing and what the limitations were, my biggest concern was, how is Venom actually going to beat Carnage? How is Carnage, like, are they going to continue existing? Like, how are they going to trap? Like, I don't know, right? That was my biggest question. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was kind of cheesed off, like, oh, you just ate him. That kind of sucked a little bit. I didn't know, but like that part was underwhelming. But I just still had fun with it. It was just a roller coaster for me.
Yeah, you can still have fun with it and recognize that it's not well made. And
you're convincing me of that. You're doing a good job of convincing me of that. It needed more work for sure. You're definitely doing a great job of it.
I don't think these movies need to translate these comic book arcs that like we've seen that, right? So just as I said, the very beginning of it, it's a story about Cletus Cassidy and Frances, I can't remember. I know it's her last name.
Frances Barrison.
Yeah. So those two characters and how one of them seems like she was just trying to help a lost soul. She felt like a lost soul. Like, just dealing with that alone gives you an anchor and something to like tie your movie to, so that you don't have to feel like, yeah, let's just get the hits and get out of here, and we'll be done in 90 minutes. It's great. Like that's basically what I'm trying to get, if not you, the listeners, to see that, like, no, we're not doing Maximum Carnage, but I also don't think that the movie needed to meet that expectation. It had enough there, as we've said, to warrant more than 90 minutes or just be more focused, because it is trying to do too much. And so I think even if you were just handling that idea of the lost souls and how they get treated by society, you could still tie Eddie and Venom into that. Like that's wrapping the hero up with the villain's plight as well. Like, it is cleaner writing, and you can see the fertile ground for how to expand the story from there. But if you're just doing a hard switch to like, actually, no, we want to talk about how Eddie and Venom don't get along anymore. And then, I guess they have to fight Carnage over it. Then by the time he bites his head off, you do feel underwhelmed, because it's like, well, we know in the comics that Carnage is technically like the son of Venom, and he says father in this movie a bunch, but it's like, I don't, like, did we spend any time on that, or like the guilt that Eddie feels that he created Carnage? Like, none of the things that they touch on actually get explored, so that, yeah, you don't feel like it earns him biting off his head, because that could have been very cathartic at the end of the movie when he goes, fuck this guy, bites his head off. That could have felt like, yeah, like that is the final point. That is Superman snapping Zod's neck at the end of Man of Steel. Well, for us anyway. I know people don't like that, but like that is the, like, yeah, like there is no reasoning with this person. We went through the movie. We know that this lost soul is really a lost soul that just needs to be gone now.
Yeah.
But none of that is attempted.
No.
What is attempted is just a bunch of like, well, people know this about that, and people know this about that, and we're just going to throw it in there, and that's that.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's like, oh, the final fight scene is like, people like the visuals from the church scene in Maximum Carnage, so let's throw everything we have at that. Like, you're absolutely right about everything you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. But it's still a fun visual movie that you're able to turn your brain off of, and I think that's all that Venom demands, really. And but I want more? Yeah, but they weren't willing to really successfully pull it off.
Yeah, I don't know what happened behind the scenes there, because it does not feel like either Tom Hardy or Andy Serkis. And I only say that because Tom Hardy does have a writing credit on this movie.
Yes, he does.
It doesn't seem like that would be it feels like, oh, good, we got it in under 90 minutes, and let's move on now. It doesn't feel like two artists doing what they wanted to do.
How much of this movie was done before the pandemic? And how much was it done during? I just want to.
You could look that up, right?
But I guess I could. But yeah, either way, I mean, it's kind of what they did with the release schedule. They're like, oh, it's delayed 2 weeks. No, it's bumped up 1 week, and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that was just publicity to get more tickets or whatever sold, but it was just, yeah, this movie was rocky to begin with, but it came together in a solid.
Like, it's
turn
fun
your
to
brain
see
off
the characters that
Yeah.
I remember back, like to still see the interaction between Anne and Dan and Eddie, or Mrs. Chen and Eddie and Venom. Like, all of that's fun, but even then, like, I still feel like interesting. Like, Anne turns into she Venom again, but then it's just kind of like it seemed like you could have done more with that.
Yeah. I mean, they could have done more with Anne. I mean, she just really shows up in the second, third act, and you're just like, oh, right, she's in this movie.
And then it was disappointing that she was like tied up in the church. I was like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Like, I thought they were going to subvert it, and it was Dan that becomes the damsel in distress.
Yeah, that part I didn't appreciate. But I mean, at the same time, it's just like, yeah, okay, well, Eddie doesn't care about Dan as much as he cares about Anne. So it's
no, but Anne would care, and if she gets lured in, and then
no, I 100% agree. Like, the visuals and everything they were playing it up, it's like, I really hope that they gave Dan that and then allowed Anne to do the fire thing. Like, that would have been cool to me, and I would have liked that. And you're right, Eddie would have had the exact same motivation to save Dan just to protect Anne. And
no, I just mean if it was just they took Dan.
Yes.
And it wasn't like they didn't build up the whole like, ooh, this is who he loves. So this sort of, it was just like they saw them interact together, and they take Dan because he was available. And then Anne goes after him, which then if you want to do it that way, then leads Eddie to be like, oh, or you could just be like, yeah, they captured Dan, and Eddie's like, Eddie and Venom are like we have to do this for Anne. Like, we can't be selfish or whatever.
Yeah. But in all fairness, I mean, it was the photo and the ring that they found that's like, oh, this is our target. This is who we have to find. So, I mean, like that, they wrote themselves into a corner with that one. They had to do Anne, which sucks because ultimately, we're putting it into damsel stress mode, and that sucks. That really, really sucks. But I mean, when we're talking about symbiotes and like the carnage that they're laying, pun intended, it's just like, is anyone really going to be helpful that doesn't have a symbiote power or anything like that, or like shrieking powers? No one really realistically is going to be helpful, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, because I feel like they even missed the mark with Shriek because not
Yes.
not that character. I thought that was, and I don't know Shriek really. I've never spent any
Mhm,
time, I don't think, through shows or comics with Shriek.
mhm,
So whatever this movie wanted to be, I was like, oh well, she's got her own agenda, and I like that it wasn't just like, oh, she's just there for the ride. Like
mhm,
it's like, no, every time she tries to use her power, which used to help her, the love of her life, now it's pissing off the new
mhm.
influence on the love of her life. I like that there was an actual conflict there.
Yeah.
But I felt like, okay, then make that the reason they're not the perfect match. They kind of just made it seem like it was a minor quibble between
Mhm.
Cassidy and Carnage about Shriek using her powers.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, just make that. I don't know. I just felt like, oh, like they really just put it down to, oh, they're not a good match. And I was like, yeah, I can see they're not a good match, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a shame because it seems like they would really work well together.
Yeah. Because the thing that was crazy to me was like, to me, it does seem like if the only thing that the symbiote and Cletus were matched on strongly was their desire to kill, and the symbiote had no ability to love, but Cletus loves, that would make sense to me. And I
Mhm.
wish they did that in a different way. I really did, because I 100% understand what you're saying about the Eddie thing and him feeling, or not even really, us not really spending time on the guilt thing. Because it seems like after like Cletus bites his hand, gets the blood in his mouth, gets like that infection thing, Eddie goes home immediately. Um, and then Venom proceeds to like really lay into him. He's like, "Hey, you're a loser for this reason. You're like, it was me that found the clue. It was me that did this. It was me that did this, and all that kind of stuff." I feel like at that point in time, had Venom not been the reason that Cletus was able to get that bite in, you know what I mean? That like the arm thing, that scene would have been more effective, because it would have been like, yeah, now we're really laying into to Eddie. Like he really screwed up. He went to try to fight Cletus in the bars, and then he did that genuinely himself. I feel like the scene would have led more into the idea of like, yeah, you should really feel guilty about this. Like, and like you did the thing that I would wanted to do, which is hurt people. Like, what the hell kind of deal. And this is why I'm leaving you, because I can't even respect you anymore. Like that scene could have been done so much better, but they just put it all on Venom to be like, you can't control yourself. You're a wild like pet dog or whatever it is that needs to be on a leash essentially. So that part really did suck for me. I was just like, I really wish this laying into Eddie scene worked a little bit better if Eddie just tried to fight Cletus in the cage or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm sure the more we look at different scenes, the more we'll be like, I wish there was
Yes,
more. But
absolutely.
this is, but yeah, that was kind of my thing, is that like,
You're right. There's no
I
time spent
think
on the
we're
guilt.
past the point of like, oh, it's a comic book movie, like we just turn our brains off. I
Mhm,
think if it is, if they're going to be produced at this rate,
mhm.
you can't really afford to be like, ah, this like, especially for what they want to be doing, which
No, you're right.
we'll get to the
Yeah.
post credit scene, right?
Yep.
Like if that's where they're heading,
Mhm.
um give these, like, give, and I'm not saying every one of them needs to be as touching and thoughtful as a
Right.
Black Panther, or as like critically thinking as, I know people think it's just a comedy, but like Ragnarok, as it
Mhm,
views colonialism and stuff like
mhm.
that. I think, sure, you can have ones that elevate a bit more, but at this point, eh, you can't just be like, oh yeah, it's just that one where they punched each other. Like it's,
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. The old comic book story movie beats of like, oh, Flash pizzazz and the old razzle dazzle just won't shine anymore. It still fundamentally needs to have those things, and it needs to be a well written movie and a good, well executed movie, right?
yes,
I 100% get what you're saying, because is this up to par? Visually, yes. Fun wise, yes. Story wise, no, it's not. It suffers from a lot, and it suffers from not being able to do enough for. I don't know what it is, but it's just there's not enough time. It just wasn't well
that
done.
is that is it. There's not enough time.
Right.
I think all of the issues come down to there's not enough time for what all the different things they've touched on they're
Fair.
trying to accomplish.
Fair. All right.
I think because
I am
the main
convinced.
issue, not the main issue, but it was a big issue, is by the time Shriek is fighting Mullins or the Stephen Graham character,
The cop?
the cop,
The cop that's
I was
sure.
like, yeah, I want her to win. Nothing about the journey of this movie has made me be like, oh yeah, we got to stop Shriek. Like because the guy, like, all they've set up is that she just wants to be with Cletus, and it seems like all things being equal, they would just hang out with each other. Maybe Cletus is a problem, but I don't see. She has only ever been seen trying to make him feel better.
Yeah,
I've never seen her outwardly try to hurt people who haven't put her in captivity or pulling a gun on her. I don't see her as this like huge villain. Like, yeah, she collected Dan and Anne, but it was like all the part of like, I want revenge on the cop that shot out my eye.
Right. It's a difficult thing, right? Because it's just like,
especially with only 90 minutes.
Yeah, but she's in love with the serial murderer and the serial killer and all that kind of stuff. So on some level, you're right. She only protects Cletus, but she's protecting a serial killer to allow him to do his thing.
I'm not saying she's this angel. I'm saying that the movie didn't really like
broken angel. Like you're right. Like, but at that point, I completely agree. I'm like, who are we cheering for right now?
Like, I don't like the cop. He's just been shitty the whole time.
Yeah,
they never even get like, he hasn't abused his power with Eddie, but it's just like, okay, good, you've done the bare minimum of not being a shitty cop. But like, I don't like him. I'm not like, oh good, like you didn't even do the follow-up to find out where she was. You just assumed she was dead. I know that Ravencroft put together a thing, but like, I don't even think you're good. You're like an exceptional cop then, or like someone who's actually digging.
Yeah,
because you're just like, yeah, she died, so there's no point in looking into that, and so let's move on. And then the rest of the time I just see him being shitty, so I don't really, that showdown didn't really work for me, because I just like, I know I'm not supposed to be rooting for her to win this, but also like, why would I be rooting for that guy to win?
Yeah, I feel like I don't care about that cop whatsoever, and I'm like, the movie hasn't given me a reason to care about the cop. You know which cop I did care about was the first one that Carnage has up against the wall and goes like, hey, please, I've got a family. Like, that I cared more about that guy than I did about the actual cop. And that's because the guy actually showed some emotion in the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna die now from this symbiote. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I cared way more about that guy than I did about the inspector or the detective. I was just the entire time I'm like, oh man, you're just whiny brat. You're just like to Eddie all the time. It's like, hey, you're gonna give me the scoop first, right? You're gonna tell me first, right? It's just like, why does that matter? Like, that's still you elevating your career on the work of other people. Like, it just sucks, man. It like, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. It's like, why is he wanting to talk to you? I do like the part where the cop is like, everywhere you go, like these kind of things happen. Like, that was kind of fun, but I'm like, okay, but they don't follow through with that. So
no. Detective Mulligan, that's his name. But yeah, you're right. Like, he has like
no redeeming
a reason
value
to be like, I know who you are, but I know that the movie was like, well, we can't dig into that because then we'll be at 92 minutes instead of 90. I don't know. Like, it's just, I think that, that's what's holding this back from me feeling like anything beyond like, I guess I had a fun time.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. I guess I had a fun time is the only thing that you can really realistically do in this movie, because everything else, you're right, it pulls it in different directions, and I didn't really realize that. The first act is essentially Carnage and Francis Barrison. That's it. And
she doesn't even really do much until the last act. Like, you don't even, I don't know if she talks until he breaks her out. And then,
well, not really.
And then she seems to be doing a different
thing, right? Yeah.
She seems to be doing a different thing once she's like actually out. Like, she's got like a more high pitched voice after she like gets out and is ready to do her thing.
That's what I found a little bit frustrating about that character. I found her performance like her character was just heavily inconsistent, and I don't know what that was, but it was just like I feel like at one point she was like had this accent, and then there wasn't an accent anymore. I don't know. It was.
Well, I
it
mean,
was
that's
weird.
the issue when everyone's British trying to do American accents.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Fair. That's fair.
yeah.
But
I mean, I think Woody Harrelson's the only like Woody Harrelson of
Michelle
the
Williams
like
is
of the people.
the main cast, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically Michelle
Maybe.
Williams is part of the main cast, but I
Reed
would
Scott,
say of
maybe?
Carnage,
Yeah.
Venom, Shriek, it's just Carnage who's actually American,
Right.
and even Detective Mulligan isn't American. That's another
Mhm.
British guy. So
Cool.
like, I guess if everyone's willing to accept the very inconsistent accent Tom Hardy's doing, I'm not really gonna get on uh the Shriek accent because
Very valid.
she's
Very
not
valid.
she's not given the same amount of time.
Mhm.
And again, a lot of this seems like things were cut out and edited. I don't mean that's going to save her accent, but I think whatever thread she was trying to like whatever she was trying to do in terms of her performance and the
Mhm.
arc of her character wasn't really represented in this.
Yep. I agree with that.
But yes, I'm sure there was times where her accent seemed inconsistent, but all of these people are putting on accents on top of accents because it's like, well, they got to switch out of whatever British accent they have and then be like, oh, I got to be from this part of America or whatever. Like,
Mhm.
and then she obviously, like, Naomi Harris obviously decided, and I'm going to do like a villain accent as well. Like,
Mhm.
so kind of an arts thing, which adds to the fun by the time
Yes.
she's like willing to do that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can't really get on her for that because it seems like a bunch of stuff was
Right.
either not shot or cut out.
Cut
to
out.
fit
I
this
would.
runtime,
Yeah.
and also the main guy has a terrible accent as well. Like,
Yeah.
so
No.
I
You're
like,
right.
yeah, it's all par for the course for this movie.
Yeah. Eddie's accent is nothing to come home for. It's bad. The one thing I will say is I appreciated the change up in Cletus's hair drastically. Drastically. That wig was horrible.
Yeah, that was not a good win. I mean, in terms of Cletus, I think everything works until they tried to connect him to Eddie. I was just like, yeah,
Yes.
why does he keep talking to him? And then at the end, he's like, it's because I wanted your friendship. I'm like, I mean, there was a way easier way of doing that if you're telling the truth. I don't know, but because these are your last words, I guess we won't have any time to dig into that either. But it was just like, did he want to be friends with him? Like, it just seemed like, yeah, not a great use of time if that was actually the through line.
Yeah, I felt like they could have done that a lot better from like they could have drawn inspiration from like Silence of the Lambs or something like that. Like that would have been
Yeah,
so
like
much
that's
better.
what they were doing, but it's
They were
just, like,
trying to, it just didn't, it was not successful in that regard. To me, anyways.
yeah, because not enough time is
Yeah.
spent of them actually talking. It's him talking at Eddie, and because we're already dealing with Eddie and Venom having their conversation,
Mhm.
even when you're listening back to the tape, you're not actually listening to what Carnage is saying because it's still Eddie being like, okay, so what, and he's trying to like call
Yeah.
back Venom. So it's just like, well, three people can't be talking right now, which
Yeah.
is what happens every time.
Yeah, it's too mustard.
So you never get to feel like they actually connect on any, like, even down to the point of Eddie never actually understanding what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's constantly like, what are you saying? I don't get it.
Mhm.
So I never felt like it made sense that other than we as the audience know they both have symbiote or will both have symbiotes at one
Mhm.
point. I don't get the connection between Cletus and Eddie.
Yeah.
And then even if you watch it play out, why would he still keep talking to Eddie if Eddie never shows any signs of understanding what he's talking about?
Mhm. Yeah, you're entirely right. I was like, every time it's like he only wants to talk to you, I'm like, I think the reason need to be a little bit more clear as to why. You know,
Yeah.
it seemed like, oh, like the idea of like, oh, I'll give you an exclusive and it'll boost your career. I was like, okay, that's a great way for you to tempt him to do whatever you want. I get that. And like obviously he only wanted to share that message with
Shriek. Yeah.
Shriek, and that was it. But then I was like, what was the intention of, like, maybe there was a plan to, like, oh, when you see my signal, we'll break out together. But they were separated so early on in the movie that you're like, that can't possibly be the consideration. Plus, you thought she was dead. Like,
Yeah, he thought she was dead. So I think the idea was if she is alive, she'll see that and say something. Like she'll like write him or whatever. I don't know.
and
But
did that even happen? It didn't, right?
well, no, because he didn't know where she was. I don't think he
Yeah.
accounted for, oh, she's in a very secret prison underground and no one knows where she is.
Yeah,
I think he was
found out
I
she
think
was-
his hope was like maybe she'll get the paper at her home, read this, and know that I'm still looking for her and know that the love is still there.
maybe, I don't know, but it was weird to me because at that point I'm like, you should have thought she was dead. Like, based on every account of everything.
Yeah, but he already knows he's gonna die. No, he doesn't know he's gonna.
No, he
die.
doesn't know he's gonna
No,
die.
but he knows he's probably not leaving either. So I think
Yeah,
at that point, what's the difference? Like, you know, like he's in the same position if he doesn't do it than if she was dead. Like, why not just give it a try?
you know what I mean. That's fair, but it's because he never planned on having those bodies get caught, right? Like,
No,
that
he was
the
very
only thing.
hurt.
Yeah,
and
he was very betrayed by that.
yeah, betrayed. That's the
Yeah.
word I was looking for. He was hurt and betrayed
Mhm.
that Eddie revealed that stuff.
Yeah, and it is what it is.
Yeah, it is, yeah, it's fun while you're watching it, but I did think that like that's too bad though. Like,
Yeah. No, you're right. You successfully convinced me. Like, pulling back the layers of this onion, I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a lot worse than I thought it was. Originally, in the beginning, I was just like, I like this movie. It's fun. It does the things that I wanted it to do in terms of visuals, but I'll fully on acknowledge the fact that it's not going to do the stuff that I want it to do in terms of writing and like following things through and all that kind of stuff, and even giving the proper people enough screen time, which is why I was kind of like, okay. To me, it seemed like, and this is why my comment was, it seemed like they were racing towards that post-credit scene so that they can pull. Because to me, the moment the credits came on, I was just like, wait, that's how they left this movie? Where's he going to go from this? They're not trying to set up anything. They're not doing anything. Now, mind you, at the time, I still did not know what the post-credit scene would be. So, like, the entire time while the credits were running, I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, that post-credit scene better be something good because I can't see Sony and MCU playing ball together. And then lo and behold, boom, we have confirmation that they're playing ball together in the coolest way possible. So to me, it felt like, okay, let's wrap up the Venom verse. Venom got invited to go to the MCU, so that's where he's going to be from now on until we see differently. You know, like that's what it felt like. It's like, let's get Venom into the MCU, and this is the movie to do it for. And then we also have to.
Yeah, I guess that's why I disagree, because no, this movie isn't the movie to be like that scene.
Yes,
in a post credit, which has nothing to do with the real narrative of.
Don't.
I guess what I like about the actual scene is it is opening up the Venom verse more, because he's saying the symbiote is saying like, hey, like there's things I can do that you don't know, like I'm keeping things from you, and he's like, here's a fraction of like what I got, and he's trying to do something. And so you feel like not only are they like on good terms now and know how to operate together, but like they are going to deepen their abilities. So it's like, oh yeah, this is a good play, and then that gets interrupted with them seeing Spider-Man, and but like I don't like that only gives me a reason of like why he would be against Spider-Man. It doesn't really make me feel like, oh yeah, like this is a perfect entry point for like.
Oh, it doesn't make me feel like there's a perfect entry point whatsoever. I'm just like, it's the best they could have done. What I meant was, they wanted to be like, oh, we're so excited this deal is happening. Let's just get him there as fast as possible. That's what it felt like, the energy of the movie. Once that post-credit scene came in, I was like, oh,
yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that is just a scene, but it's not like, it doesn't feel like it's part of
I agree.
the movie.
No, I agree. It's not
the
a part
energy
of the movie
is not that, but yeah,
yes,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I wanted to talk about more stuff before we got to the post credit, but we're
Yeah.
here now, so we might as well talk about the post credit. So
Right.
yeah, they've decided to take some time away. They're on a beach. It's a line that was from earlier in the movie about what Venom would want to do when he had his freedom.
Hmm.
And they're on the beach. He's got his toes in the sand and everything. And then I guess they cut to the room where he's like, like there is like I've lived like symbiotes, as you said earlier, like basically the universe of symbiotes is crazy. There's a lot to know about.
Mhm.
And if I had told you everything, it would blow your mind. So like, let me give you a little taste of it. And I don't know if they're trying to say that, because obviously what's happening there is when Doctor Strange does his
Mhm.
thing from the No Way Home trailer,
Yeah.
that's what interrupts the Venom and Eddie conversation. I'm assuming that's what they're trying to
Yeah,
get
to be
across.
fair, we got to pull back and say like that's the best guess right now. We don't have confirmation, but that's the best guess right now. We still need.
But what I'm saying, and I know everyone's like, "Oh, that's what breaks the multiverse." But I'm thinking that like it's a bunch of things. So like
Mhm.
Venom doing that, in addition to Stephen Strange doing his
Mhm.
enchantment or whatever. Like
Mhm.
I think we're gonna see there was a bunch, and even probably Sylvie doing what she did. I think there's
Mhm.
probably a bunch of things that leads to the breaking the multiverse, not just that one thing.
Mhm.
And so this was a smart way of adding Venom into that moment. I don't know
Right.
about the universe, but that moment, locking in, because he's like, "Oh, I didn't do anything. This is something else." And then they
Mhm.
see the TV. They're in a different room now.
Yeah.
They see the TV, and their whole thing has been like, "We are the lethal protectors," or whatever they're called.
Mhm.
And so they see this thing where everyone's like, "Look at this menace to society, Spider-Man. His name's Peter Parker. Like he's a killer." And so Venom is kind of like, "All right, this guy, like now we can kill this guy because New York needs our help."
Mhm.
um yeah, I thought it was, because I think the clip I always saw was just him licking the TV being like, "This guy." And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, so yeah, now they're aware of Spider-Man. And I heard that was supposed to be the post, not this how it's shot. Obviously it couldn't have been
Mhm.
how it was shot, but like people were saying back on the first Venom that was the post-credit scene, was Venom seeing Spider-Man on the TV and being like, "Fuck that guy," or something like that.
You mean on Venom 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I heard that. That was a rumor too. Like that was what the post credit scene was going to be for Venom 1.
But so it's here now. It is essentially that, but I guess after this movie we have more reason to believe that this is how they will fight. I mean,
Mhm. We
I
have
feel like
more.
it's still short-lived because
Right.
you know, there isn't going to be any hate there. It's just like, "Oh
Yeah.
well, we think you're bad." It's, I don't know. It's what I don't like about Batman versus
Mm.
Superman. Like one person wrongfully thinking the other person's the bad guy, but
Right.
obviously they're gonna work together. So like,
Yeah. Because even like the nods to the Lethal Protector storyline, which is Venom and Spider-Man working together, it's all too on the nose of like that's not just an Easter egg now, that's just a spoiler. I feel that you're gonna get them to work together in No Way Home. I feel, but I mean it's cool confirmation that we were like, okay, this is how they're taking all those other characters and putting them into No Way Home. And then this is also nice confirmation of being like, maybe that is the Vulture in the Morbius trailer and all that kind of stuff, right?
I don't know why you ever thought it wasn't the Vulture. It's the Vulture.
No, it's not that I didn't. It's just that I still want confirmation. I want them to say it. I want them to say that it's the Vulture.
I mean, that's you not thinking that it's actually the Vulture, but like, what?
Yes.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I don't trust their sliminess. I really don't. Maybe it's Clayface. I don't know, right? It's just all these different things of like
they got somebody from the DC universe.
No, sorry. God,
You mean Chameleon?
Chameleon, that's it.
Yeah, maybe it's
sorry.
Chameleon.
I'm definitely confusing people now. But like,
well,
maybe
it's Michael
that.
Keaton,
Maybe
so
it's that.
I get it.
Yeah, but like the idea of like, no, I want them to dead on say it, because until they do, they have ability to like write something away and like, haha, we fooled you, and I don't want that. I don't want the rug pulled out underneath me.
Yeah.
So I still don't believe it. I'm 80% there.
We'll see. I don't think Venom is going to be in No Way Home, but we'll see.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think that's I don't think that makes sense that he would be in that,
Mm.
because
So
that makes sense if it's the same writers as this movie, where it's like, let's just do everything and nothing needs to be explained or have any but that's not how they're doing these Spider-Man movies.
No, they're not.
So
Yeah,
to
Spider-Man's a
add
different
Venom
level.
to that, in addition to what everyone already assumes is going to happen, and the confirmation that at least one of the villains from another universe will be in it,
Mhm.
doesn't make sense to me that they would throw in Venom as well.
Mm.
Maybe he's in a post credit.
Didn't make sense
Just
why they throw in Venom for Spider-Man 3 with Raimi, and it seems like they're doing it
yeah, but he was
again.
part of the marketing. That's not that they wouldn't. That wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, surprise, he's in it now. That was
Mhm.
part of the marketing. They showed you the black suit. They showed you Venom.
Right.
That what I'm saying is, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm saying, to me, that is a weird choice because you already have so much else going on.
Mhm.
And why would you then try to divert and pay off this thing to like a pocket universe?
No, I agree. It's that I feel like it's a lot of this is fan service. A lot of it's because some people are going to make some money, like a lot of money off that. It's going to work. Um, and I feel like that's the only thing they're going to do. But like, am I excited for it? Sure. It's the idea of these multiverses is like, at this point, my mind is just thinking, what other universes can they borrow from that they can do, and like all these Easter eggs and all this kind of situations in No Way Home or Multiverse of Madness, or just where is this all going? And that's exciting to me. But to me, like, the first thing I said when getting out of Venom was like, that was a mediocre movie, but a brilliant setup. Like, that's what it felt like. But yeah, it's a situation now where I'm like, this is exciting. The more I think about it, the less sense it makes, especially for these two characters to be meeting. But
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
still
to
ultimately
be clear,
exciting
like
to
they
me.
didn't meet. He saw
Yes,
Spider-Man on TV, and it's like,
like the screen.
yeah, and I, based on the events of the movie, I can assume, oh, that's going to be their first target as
Yeah,
the lethal
as
protector.
the lethal protector. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
was thinking, like, who's that guy? Like, I was thinking, like, is that guy like an actor that's supposed to nod, like, be a nod to someone else or something like that? Like the guy that's like, "Why are you in my room?" kind of deal. But apparently, I think it's just a guy. It's just a random dude on vacation.
yeah, I don't know who that is.
Yeah. I don't
Could
think
be someone.
I felt like I was reading into that. Maybe it was like Andy Serkis's brother or something. I don't know, like
Yeah,
a
could be. Yeah,
director's kind of
could
Easter
just be
egg.
someone that the crew knows.
Yeah, or maybe one of the crew is
Could
like,
be
"Hey,
one of the crew.
it's your
Yeah.
birthday. Let's do this." That would be kind of fun. But yeah, maybe I'm reading into that a little bit too
No,
much.
I
But
mean, I feel like that's usually like one of the, like when someone gets a line like that, it could just be an actor that's like, yeah, I read for it. This is where, but
Mhm.
it also, as you said, could be someone related to the
Mhm.
cast and crew. It could be someone who is part of the crew.
Mhm.
Yeah, but yeah, I think the post credit, as you said, it's like, okay, Venom now is aware of Spider-Man.
Yes.
Uh, it still plays into me being like, oh, they just don't care about Venom though. Like this is
Mhm.
a delivery system for the like buddy cop, or not even buddy cop, but like the odd couple thing they want to be doing,
Yeah.
which is fine. But it's like, okay, now you're playing with Spider-Man, and it's like we're coming at it backwards because the they don't have to do it this way. I'm
Mhm.
hoping they have a plan, but what people like about Venom versus Spider-Man is that the symbiote was on Peter Parker, feels rejected, and it's
Yes.
like, I'm gonna fuck that guy up. And then
It's a personal vendetta. Yeah,
it's
for
a
sure.
personal vendetta, and Eddie Brock feels slighted by Peter Parker as well.
Yes.
And so that is their perfect marriage. That's why they work so well together. And then down the line, the relationship becomes a bit more complicated.
Mhm.
There's still tension, but they work together and stuff. This, as I said, really bums me out because it's like, well, now it looks like we're just doing the Batman versus Superman thing, which is like, let's just get right to the end and be like,
Mhm.
they'll fight for a bit and then be friends.
It's very simplistic. It's too simplistic for the
That's
background
what
of
it
what
looks
this
like to
is.
me. I know
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what will happen. It's just, yeah,
You're most likely right, though. You're most likely right about that. It's the same reason why a lot of people in the original X-Men movie felt cheated for Wolverine versus Sabretooth. The idea like they didn't even know who they were is like that's just that you didn't need to write like a lot of different stuff, but you could have been like, oh, there's the acknowledgement just to a nod to everything else. But you're right, like the way you're describing it is the most likely way it's going to happen. Is the idea like, oh, he's the lethal protector, and that's the first target because now they're on the same page. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm actually gonna let you eat people, not like how I promised you in the first one, and then just didn't follow through with it.
I mean, in this movie, he gives very good reasons why he didn't let him keep eating people.
100%. Yeah, 100%. There were solid reasons.
That was less just a like empty promise and more like, hey, let's still calm down before we start doing that.
I get that. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I get every reason for that. It was just it added to the tension very very well though. Between Venom and Eddie, so it's like you promised. It was fun. I liked it.
But yeah, that seems to be how they're going to do that. I just think that to then put him in No Way Home might be too early.
To be clear, I agree with what you're saying because Venom in No Way Home makes No Way Home worse, but it makes Venom that much better. You know, no one's being like because now Venom's being brought up to the writing standards that Spider-Man in the MCU is getting. So that's going to be really, really nice. But it makes Venom better, but it does not make Spider-Man better in this situation. I feel.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
I would be surprised if they put him in any meaningful part of No Way Home.
Right. Now, I think one of my biggest questions too is, does that mean Sony's playing ball to get these two together, but then they won't play ball just to get this Tom Holland Spider-Man back to the MCU? I mean, back to the Spider-Man universe so they can start doing their own things. Please, on the record, we're saying, don't do that. Please don't do that.
What are you saying? What?
I don't want Spider-Man to be taken from the MCU and put into the Sony universe after whatever this crossover event is, because they could possibly do it. I don't want that. Just Sony and Marvel keep playing ball, keep being friends, keep playing ball. That's what we like. Like the relationship was rocky. Just you're at a good spot right now. Hopefully they just keep playing ball. I really hope that Sony's not trying to rip Spider-Man into their own universe with this crossover event. I really hope it's not. Because I could full on see them negotiating, being like, okay, we'll give you this crossover event if you give us Spider-Man fully back. And then I just don't want that to happen. I could see it, but I don't want it.
Well, please yeah, I guess we'll see how that goes. Mm-hmm. Let's rate this movie. Mm-hmm. What would you give it? Out of
6s all around. 6s.
Okay, yeah, you answered for me as well. Yeah, I'm giving this a 6.
Really. Oh, I didn't realize I was answering for you as well. I
feel like that's what all around means. But yeah,
6 all around from me, from my camp. Sorry, that was a good critique of the guess, I guess. But yeah, 6.
Yeah, I gave it a 6. I don't remember what I gave the first one, but I had more fun with it.
Yep.
I think that makes it better than the first one, but for me, the first one at least had a more clear path.
Yeah, it was trying.
I don't think it's as entertaining, but it is like it seemed more focused.
Yeah,
but I had more fun with this unfocused movie. I wish that it was more focused, and I think that happens with a longer runtime, but it doesn't necessarily have to have a longer runtime. As I've pointed out, there was many things attempted that didn't need to be attempted.
Right,
you could have focused on just one of the things.
Yep, you're right. You've successfully convinced me that this movie needs an extra 15 to 20 minimum.
Well, yeah, but I don't like putting the time on it. It's just more, what are you doing with the story, and however long it is at the end of that is however long it is.
Which it's fair. I'm just saying the amount of time that I'm just estimating for whatever that's worth, which is, I know it's not worth a lot. To be like an extra 15, 20 minutes probably would have helped this movie along.
Yeah, maybe. Well,
I'm just saying that.
Maybe there's gonna be an extra extended cut, or maybe they'll just get it better on the third one.
Yeah, maybe Circus will have a director's cut, like the Circus cut.
Maybe.
But either way, I wanted to let you know that my original ranking of this was going to be 7.5. You have convinced me very successfully that this movie is a lot worse than I thought it was.
Fair. Yeah, it is a solid 6 for me. You also gave it a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. We are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network. That means we're on the same network as great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, a whole bunch of shows. So please head on over there, thatshelf.com. You'll see those shows. You'll see our show. If you'd like to hear older episodes, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @tdfspoiled. You can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Amazon Music, a bunch of places. If we're not where you go to get your podcast, please let us know through email or Twitter, and we will add ourselves there. But in the meantime, if we are where you are, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends, your loved ones, and even your enemies. Anybody that
and your
ever talks
coworkers.
to you about podcasts,
and your coworkers. I hear it's great team building to listen
Yes.
to the same podcasts together. So let them know.
Very good point. All right. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.